Okay, thank you so much, and hello everyone. I'm really honored to speak with you all tonight. I have a lot of respect for typography designers, and I really appreciate all the work that you do. And I see a lot of parallels in some of my wayfinding work, along with typography. As you can see, my background image is a close-up of one of the signs that I made for the Laver Cup. Sometimes when you're typesetting 400 signs as fast as you can, you miss some of the details until you print it at 6 feet high. And I was particularly, I really enjoyed seeing the ligature of the FF and the I in officials. And I was so titillated I took a photo of it. So I thought you guys might appreciate that. So my name is Genevieve. You can also call me Jen. And I design wayfinding systems, which means I spend a lot of time thinking about how typography shows up in public spaces. And so tonight I wanted to talk to you about typography as infrastructure. But first, a little bit about me. So I studied a Bachelor of Design Arts, specializing in graphic design. And I was really lucky enough to start working for a small agency where we did a lot of hands-on things. So we did a lot of packaging, and we also did a lot of hospitality work, which I really loved. But I found that we poured our heart and our souls into these restaurants, and they would only stick around for a couple of years. PM24 and Merrywell on the right, they were only there for a couple of years. I think I've designed the exact same restaurant space in Melbourne 3 times in as many years. It was a little soul-crushing. But part of the work that we did in hospitality design is we really, we worked with a lot of disciplines. We work with mill workers and architects, and I really enjoyed leaning into each other and learning about each other's disciplines, which created a really strong foundation, I think, for my creative career. So as you can see, I worked at a sign shop, so we did custom tiles, which was really fun. We did also a lot of custom wall coverings, so this was for an Australian football team, Carlton, if anyone is from Australia. I also did a really brief stint doing a couple of episodes on The Block, which is an Australian TV show for amateur home renovators. Very strange. It's really big in Australia. So the picture on the left, the big one, that is a challenge. It was a mini episode where the contestants, who were a pair, it was sponsored by a camera company. So they gave each of the couples a camera, and they went around Melbourne and took photos. And then they came back to my desk, and I had to create a wallpaper from one of their images that was a repeating pattern. And then we printed off the wallpaper, and then the couple installed it themselves, and they had to design a little area in front of it. Very bizarre. They sent me photos of dead birds and all manner of strange things. But it was a good experience. I would never design for a camera again when there's a producer there trying to start drama where there is no drama. It was a very eye-opening experience. But I've always really gravitated towards signage. I find how we use materiality and texture and color super interesting. So I guess I've naturally gravitated over to wayfinding. And in 2021, I started my own independent practice, called Community Studios. So I primarily work on civic, healthcare, and cultural and event environments. So some of you might not have heard of wayfinding before. So Wayfinding 101, it's the process of figuring out where you are, where you want to get to, and how you figure out how you're going to get there. So as a wayfinding designer, I help design clues to help you figure that out. So it might be a map, might be a sign system, or there's other subtle things I can do in the environment to push you along without you realizing. It's not as creepy as it sounds, I promise. But wayfinding is really essential because it enhances trust and confidence, makes people feel comfortable and in control of the environment. It also reduces stress and cognitive load, minimizes frustration, and supports emotional well-being. It also increases flow and reduces bottlenecks at decision points, trying to get where you need to go, especially in a place like a university like this one. It's also, good wayfinding is also inclusive. It considers diverse needs like different languages, mobility levels, vision impairments, neurodiversity, etc. Good wayfinding also contributes to safety. It supports safe, quick evacuations in an emergency. It also helps emergency service providers come into an unknown building. Also, it helps if you've never been to a place and there is clear signage, there might be a clear map telling you where to go. That will help reduce safety or will help reduce instances of crime. Because if you're doubling back and you're visibly lost, it becomes an opportunity for crime. So if you're not visibly looking lost, then potentially people won't see that as well. Also, identity. So, as some of you people in the audience might be brand designers, wayfinding can help contribute to placemaking and brand expression, and it helps create memorable and distinctive environments. So, leading on from what wayfinding is, one of the things that we need to be aware of constantly when we're doing wayfinding is cognitive mapping. So cognitive mapping, that's your mental representation, probably your internal model in your mind that you use constantly to comprehend and store and recall information about spatial environments. So that might be location of objects, routes, landmarks. It also helps us understand how things are related to each other in the space. And it helps us make decisions and it helps us plan our routes, like how you might be planning to go to your next destination, if that's home or somewhere else this evening. And what I find really fascinating about cognitive mapping is it's never fixed. We're constantly updating these maps in our mind, and we're always updating. And also it helps us to navigate unfamiliar places. If you haven't been somewhere before, I went to Toronto for the first time last year, and what I thought was really fascinating is every restaurant you go to, the washroom is downstairs. So if you can find the stairs, you can find the washroom. So even though you've never been to that restaurant, I'm sure stairs and washrooms are an accessibility nightmare, but it's really interesting what you start connecting the dots on. So even you use that information to recall to help you with new environments. So cognitive mapping, it's about perception and memory, and it also helps with people with decision making. So some of the things that I think about when I'm doing my wayfinding design is user behavior. So it's understanding how people think and move within a space and how they interact with the information and cues provided by the environment. So some of those factors might be individual differences, might be age, gender, spatial ability, people's different experiences, like where they come from, different countries. Also the environmental complexity. If it's a large building, it's going to be a lot harder. Also context. What's the purpose of the journey? What time of day might it be? What type of lighting? Are they tired? Are they stressed out? Are they happy? That's going to really affect people's cognitive ability to receive cues. Because ultimately, people tend to remember their strongest emotion from an experience better than they remember everything else. We've all been on that vacation where one thing went wrong. And for a brief period of time, it was extremely stressful. And then objectively, the rest of vacation was fine, but that one thing really sets in your brain. And that's because your emotional processing, it activates more areas of your brain, particularly in the amygdala, which your amygdala is your memory encoding and retention. So when we're doing wayfinding, I'm trying to have feelings of calm and ease so that you don't remember your wayfinding experience. So one of my projects that I worked on is the city of Revelstoke, doing the wayfinding, the citywide wayfinding. So this was a really fun, interesting project. So this was the main gateway. You come in off the highway and you needed something just before you enter town to say, hey, you've made it. If Revelstoke was your destination, you have made it. And the brand designers for Tourism Revelstoke, they found a 100-year-old photo of the old Revelstoke train signage, which Revelstoke has a really strong industrial, it's a big forestry background. So they reworked from the photograph, they reworked this typography, and they turned it into the Tourism Revelstoke logo, which then we used and put into facelit channel letters. for that brand continuity. Although I will say we took the logo verbatim and the period at the end, which is historically accurate for the train sign. The amount that I have had to talk about that period, I wish that I could have deleted it, honestly. But things you learn, you know? Yeah. And so one of the things that traditional graphic design school really didn't teach me, because at traditional graphic design school, they teach you about type as static as on a page or on a screen, and that you can do that you can move it into different lighting. But unfortunately, when you've got channel letters that are welded into a steel beam with a raceway that's running power to it, you can't really pick it up and move it. So a lot of the things when you're considering type for the environment is you need to think about movement and distance and lighting, time of day. Is it dusk? Is it nighttime? Are people stressed? Is it a multilingual audience? What's the weather like? There's a lot of snow in Revelstoke, so we had to really consider that. I had to look up the average snowfall on the ground and make sure that everything was going to be higher than that. And you also need to consider architecture and the existing environment. Nobody really wants your sign, but your sign has to go there. So you have to make it work. So this is some of the park signage that we did. Ooh, very pixelated. Nice. And this is also, so on the left is the pedestrian directional that we did, and on the right is the vehicle directional. So it's very rare that people are coming at your signs and at your typography straight on. Often it's very angled. There also people are mid-decision. They're coming at it from different modes of transport. They might be walking, they might be cycling, they might be driving. So you really need to consider what the distances are. So there's a bunch of diagrams that are helpful online, but as you guys know better than most people, every typeface is completely different. So take it with a grain of salt. It will give you cap heights and the distance. It's very different if people are driving 100 kilometers an hour in a car versus if they're driving 10 kilometers an hour. But I've been doing this for years. The best way, print out a section at scale, stick it up on the wall, look at it from different angles. And yeah, because every font is different, which is great. But hard and fast rules don't really exist here. And that's not to bring the vibe down, but as we kind of touched on a little bit in the earlier conversations, is that there are real world consequences that happen with the decisions that we're making. So in 2016, a woman named Laura was experiencing an asthma attack, and her asthma puffer was faulty. So she navigated to the hospital in Massachusetts, but it was late into the night, early hours of the morning, and the main entrance to the emergency room was locked. And that's where the big signage was, that's where all the lights were, but she gets there and the doors are locked. And there was an after hours entrance that had no lighting and no signage, and that's where she was supposed to go in. So she tried to troubleshoot. She's having a medical emergency, so she doesn't have all of her cognitive abilities. She calls 911, she gets transferred to a few people, but unfortunately they did not find her in time. So a woman who was 34 ended up dying of a very treatable healthcare issue. And there's several failures here, signage being one of them. But these things do have real world effects. So what happened from this is her husband campaigned for many years, and almost 10 years later, Massachusetts changed their city bylaws and their health code bylaws. So bylaws are written up as rules that you have to follow, and it will be sizes, colors, all kinds of things. And thankfully, the things that got implemented in Massachusetts are already things that are implemented in the bylaws here. Which leads me into the work that I did for Kirsian Regional Hospital in Terrace. So as mentioned with Laura's case, it's very rare that people approach healthcare in with all of their cognitive abilities. It might be that you are going there and you're stressed about a procedure for yourself, or you might have a loved one that you need to go see. So people are very stressed, they're very distracted, and they're often very overwhelmed. So one of the things that's a little counterintuitive for healthcare is more hierarchy doesn't add any more simplicity for people trying to navigate the system, which is sort of interesting and really specifically for healthcare. Typically with healthcare, you categorize into 3 different destinations. So your primary destinations, your secondary, and your tertiary. Anything more than that confuses people. So fewer levels, but used consistently will outperform for a complex system, especially in healthcare where there's a lot of different services happening in the same space. Because consistency beats cleverness in healthcare. And typography, especially in healthcare, really needs to feel stabilizing and it needs to feel reassuring. So this is the care station. Okay. So then this is where I lead into, I think that a lot of wayfinding design and a lot of typography and typeface design is very similar because it's systems thinking. So it's problem solving and it's decision making that emphasizes the interconnectedness of your parts. Just like a typeface, your letters need to work differently together depending on the situation. Same with my signs. Will they work if they're together? Will it work if they're completely standalone? And also, what we do in our systems thinking is it gets sent out into the world and you don't always have control of what happens to it, for better or for worse. But also in your system, you really need to think about when it goes out into the world beyond you. As culture changes, so does typography, so does wayfinding and signage. They're living, breathing systems. They're never static. And if you see wayfinding as static, it's not a good system. So this was for the Laver Cup, which is Roger Federer's tennis tournament. So it was in Vancouver a couple of years ago, and it was just in San Francisco last year. So event signage is very different to healthcare in that it's fast timelines. There's high crowd density, so you need to go a bit above people's heads generally. It also needs to be high visibility, and there is so many different user groups for an event. So you've got media, you've got the players, you've got the VIPs, you've got the attendees, the cleaners, the bar staff, the temporary staff, the people who've worked in the same stadium for 30 years, who are annoyed that you're there and you've taken over their event. It's a spicy time. But this is a good way to segue into getting on my soapbox. Signage does not equal wayfinding, and wayfinding does not equal signage. So just because it's a sign does not mean that it's wayfinding, and just because it's wayfinding does not mean it's a sign. So let me elaborate. Here is a very nondescript hallway that was in the Chase Center for the Laver Cup in San Francisco last year. So this is very interesting to see it from this angle. Okay, so let me explain. So on the right-hand side, behind the mirrored glass, is the player area. So that's where their change rooms, their medical staff, their catering, their like inner sanctum is there, sort of their green room. Down the end, sort of on the right-hand side, down that corridor at the very end, that's the player walk-on. So they come out of their lockers and they go down to the end and they walk onto the court and they play their game. Sounds straightforward, right? To the left, down the very end, past that exit sign, sort of just out here, that is the all-staff entrance. So that's where your media, your cleaners, your bar staff, your broadcasting team, everybody is crawling around there. So they need to come in and go around down the end past the Golden State wallpaper and keep going around, and they can't go into the play area. But then also closer to me on this side of the image, you've also got the media room. So that's where all the press releases are. That's where the camera crews and all the journalists need to get to. And then also almost where I'm standing in relation to this image, just behind me taking the photo, is also the VIP elevator. So they have their own main entrance, then they come in off the street, they get in the elevator, they go up to their like ninth floor, beautiful hospitality space, and then they come back down and they need to get to their court seats, which is sort of down and to the right. So you have so many different user groups, but you have people very close to the players, which is a highly sensitive area. Which becomes a huge wayfinding challenge. And one of the things with the VIPs is they've paid minimum $20,000 each to be there. So it needs to be a really elevated experience. So even though this is a purely really functional area, we needed to make it safe but feel elevated. So we could put stanchions in, and stanchions are the black, the poles around here. I'd love to know how many people went under or over the stanchions just tonight. I think we're all guilty of doing that, myself included. So that was the obvious choice to help. But you have people who've spent $20,000 to be there, so you kind of have to give them something a little better. So this is what we suggested. So this was an early rendering where we said, how about we put planter boxes with plants? And they ended up being about hip height. And it was a short-term event. The plants were in there for 5 days, so we opted for real plants. And what was really fascinating was in such a controlled, contrived environment as a stadium, the smell was incredible. The smell of soil and actual real plants was wild. I was really surprised. It really felt high-end, and it actually felt like a cool place to hang out in, which is wild. And so when the players arrive, I lose a lot of my access. But for what I found from the media footage and the footage they put out is it looks like the players hung out there a lot. And I think it was because of the plants and the smell, which is a really weird tactile thing that I knew that it would elevate for the VIPs, but I was really surprised to see the footage and see them hanging out there. So that was the final thing. So I guess my point is the sign on the right, wayfinding. The plants on the left can also be wayfinding. So wayfinding is about empowering people to navigate the world with confidence, dignity, and connection. And according to research, everybody perceives type differently. I'm sure if we had a discussion in this room, every single person would have a different opinion on what makes reading faster for them. So it might be some people like a sans serif, some people like serif, some people like tight leading, some people like really closed leading. Different coning. We're all really different. So the best that you can do in wayfinding is when we affect a lot of the environment, a lot of different user groups, the best you can do is find the middle ground. So some of my advice for you that I have found out through trial and error in my career is design for failure states. Test your type at the worst moment, not the ideal one. If you're looking to do typography that goes out into the real world, I recommend getting off your screen, prototype it early, print it off, stick it up, look at low lighting, look at it from really different angles and see how it performs, as I'm looking at the font at a really different angle from here than I usually look at on my screen. And also, a lot of design really screams for attention, and the thing that drives me to wayfinding so much is that invisibility can be success. I know that I've done a really good job in my work when people haven't cognitively noticed my work. They have gone about their day, they've had their conversation with their friend, they've thought about what they're having for dinner tonight, and they just know that a sign will turn up when they need to and continue about their day. But going back slightly to Alicia's talk, I think this is a really good tie-in. People are insanely resilient. You know, Helvetica is not necessarily the most accessible font, and people will figure it out. People will adapt. And so rules can be broken. This is the Paris Metro sign. If you haven't been aware of it, it's stunningly beautiful. I love the hardware. I have so many questions about the upkeep and the maintenance and how often that steel hardware needs to be replaced and cleaned. And I'd be curious about how, like, if people graffiti it or not, but it's become part of it. And I think after Alicia's talk, I'm now going to start calling this sign the frog. I think it fits, you know? So some rules can be broken, like the Paris Metro, but pick and choose your moments. So the biggest designer that you know in your life, the biggest designer with a capital D, I can guarantee you when their loved one is in a healthcare environment, they don't care about what font you use. They care about their loved one. They just want to get to where they're going as fast as possible. And if you find this stuff interesting, we have a professional association. We're called SEGD. We've been around for 50-something years now. SEGD stands for Society for Experiential Graphic Designers. We've kind of dropped the G a little bit in recent terms. We're a lot more multidisciplinary these days since our inception. So we're architects, lighting designers, graphic designers, industrial designers, technologists. We're a fun, weird group of very lovely nerds. So I co-chair the Vancouver chapter. We do a couple of events every year. And if this type of work sounds like something you're interested in, not even just wayfinding, we do exhibition design and all manner of interesting, lovely, nerdy things. And you guys are typography designers, so you're probably nerdy too. I'm going to go out on a limb. So you can find us segd.org, or you can find us on Instagram. We have a chapter, segd_Vancouver. Thank you so much for listening to my talk. If you would like to find out more about me or connect again, you can find me at communitystudios.ca. You can also find me on Instagram at Genevieve Tyack. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Genevieve. As I just navigate my way around one of those barriers right there. Thanks for helping make a lot of that visible for us. I know it's something like we all see every day or when we're in a new environment, but we don't appreciate from that perspective, even as designers, I feel like. So does anyone have any questions for Genevieve? Yeah.
What is the largest letter form you've ever had to create for a sign?
Oh. I think we did like a 16-foot Y, which was pretty cool. And then we put it in the ocean because we were in our early 20s and why not? But really large letter forms scare me, truly. I did a talk, there's a Sign Association of Canada, and I'm too far in that I go to that now. And we did a walking tour of Niagara Falls. I don't know if you've been, but the like amusement park area. There's a guy that's been doing that for like 40, 50 years. And he was telling a story of one of his like 12 feet letters that fell from a building. And the people whose building it was assumed that he had taken it down for maintenance. And he saw it and called them and was like, why is that letter gone? And they're like, oh, we thought you took it. And they never found it. They found like one section of it because it was an acrylic face panel and some of it smashed. They never found the rest of it. And like, if you look at the building, one of the gripes with architecture with architects is that they never build places for signage to go. And looking at this, like, it was almost like a bird's eye view sort of tower, like in an airport. I don't understand how they installed it there, and I don't understand how somebody probably took it or it fell. It's a huge mystery. So ever since then, I don't want to deal with huge letters unless they're mounted on the ground.
Wow, well, great question, great answer. If anyone from the Signage Society that wants to like do a deep dive on that and give us that story too, I'm sure we'd have them for that because piqued my curiosity. Do you have another question for Genevieve? Yeah, one here and then over there maybe.
Hi, thank you for your talk. I am currently also working in signage, but from an industrial design background. I was curious because what I find most challenging is trying to design wayfinding for spaces that aren't built yet. Trying to figure out from an architectural drawing what the issues might be. I was kind of wondering, how do you tackle that when you come across those situations?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say that's about 80% of my work. The Lava Cup is really interesting in that it's a fully formed space, which is very rare. So there's some constraints and you can only go over the top of what's there, really. Or you risk damaging and having to pay for repairs. But yeah, a lot of it's really experience, and it's really poring over the drawings and looking at different data sets. I get asked semi-regularly if I'm worried about AI, but there's too much that happens in here that I'm not even aware of. Yeah, and that's part of the challenge is like you can put up a beautiful room sign or a directional sign, but if it's directly underneath an overlit, like an overhead sign, a light, and then you've got glare, the sign is irrelevant. So it's really just looking over the documentation, trying to pull in the architects, if there's a lighting designer or interior designers, and just they don't really want to talk to you, but you just have to kind of pull them into a room and be like, and you have to be nimble on your feet. Sometimes things change and there's nothing you can do. And I think that what the Laver Cup really taught me, is problem solving on your feet. I ended up last minute out at site this week looking. My signage installer called me and he's like, these unit IDs can't go here because there's this fire hardware. I'm like, oh, cool. That would have been helpful to know. We did this 6 months ago. But you just be nimble. And I went to site within 30 minutes and we just talked it out and you just go look at it. Yeah. And accept that mistakes happen. It's fine. Especially like if you were doing a space like BCIT and you look at all the wayfinding just in here, there's things that you're not going to anticipate. So what I find is I take a lot of time building trust and respect with other disciplines, but also with my trades to say, I'm not precious. We need to work together and we'll figure it out. Just call me if there's a thing. Just call me, send me a photo, and I'll tell you what to do. And I'll also ask their opinions. It goes a long way with relationship building. But yeah, it comes from experience and it comes through errors, a lot of errors, and that's okay. That's fine.
Yeah, right over here, yep.
You talked briefly about some of the non-signage, non-typography parts of your job, and I was just, like with the planters and things, I was just wondering, what are other ways that you kind of use the space or other things in the environment that aren't signage to direct people kind of subconsciously?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so one of the things, one of my pet peeves that I love to talk about, and architects don't love that I talk about, you know when you go into the airport and it's the first stop, it's like baggage drop, and you go in and it's parallel counters that come in and you directly face. And then you're like, okay, I dropped off my bag, they did the thing, where do I go next? And you almost need a sign behind them, but that would be too many signs for how long the counters are. But if they angled the counter instead of it coming straight along like this, but if they angled it that way, if you hit that counter, it's already half blocking you from one side. So you will naturally push off that way without even realizing. And that is the stuff that I find genuinely fascinating. Same if you go into a building lobby and there's just a circular reception desk or security desk. That can be helpful if the elevator core is like right behind you. But if it's not, you're like, when people have to think about it, that there's some school of thought that putting a sign in is a failure of the design, which is a little bit reductionist. I get where they're going with it, but if you can do other things like the shapes of furniture or where it's placed can help move people along and not have a sign, that's ideal. Like, I don't want to put signs in. It would be better. But there's things like that. So it's putting barriers in, but without it feeling like a barrier. So like putting plants in that people actually want to spend time with, which is also a success and also a failure, I guess, because you don't want to bottleneck. But yeah, does that help answer your question? Yeah. Also lights. Sometimes you can like shine lights at people and they'll move on.
We have one last question over here.
So after the system's been designed and then it's been implemented, is there often, sometimes or never, a kind of audit of the wayfinding system to find out, does it actually work?
Yes, not as often as I would like. There's some provincial institutions that only get more funding from the government if they do audits. And what I find is broken is that they don't actually implement anything in the audit. That nearly broke me when I first moved here. And I'm like, well, you didn't do anything from your 2012 audit, so just do that again? But then I learned that they don't get their funding. But yeah, like I was saying, wayfinding systems and culture is ever evolving, and they shouldn't stop. And I'm always an advocate of coming in a year later, 5 years later, and reassessing. Most people, like, these projects take a really long time, and by the time we get to the end, they're like, we never want to see you ever again. Which is a shame. Because and wayfinding falls in the cracks of things where it's not really anyone's department. Is it engineering? Is it marketing? Like, it doesn't neatly fit anywhere, which is a real shame. And that's what I find is part of my mission, is to educate people onto, let me come in and take a look. Let me spend an hour, walk around, and then, like, it doesn't need to go through me. It can go through the sign fabricator. But I guess one of the issues that they run into is there's one sign and the cost is not that much, but it's the call out fee to get the guy to do the thing. You know, it's not a $300 sign. It's the guy needs to drive out from Richmond to come here, stick the thing up. Yeah. So, but I wish there was more of it. I really do. And I'm a staunch advocate for it, but yeah, it doesn't happen as often as I like.
Well, even if not everyone's audits happen as often as they should, I know that we would like to hear from you again in a year, 5 years, something like that, or we'll follow you on there. But thank you very much for that amazing talk, Genevieve.
Thank you so much.